Hello, everybody, and welcome to Adobe Live. My name is Flynn. I'll be hosting today. We're coming to you live from the land of the Dharawal people here in Sydney, Australia. I am joined by Illustrator, also from Sydney, Jeremy Lord. Hey, Jeremy, how you doing?
Hey man, good. How are you going?
I'm good. I'm good. Middle of the week, hump day here in
Yeah.
Australia. So, only got another 2 days to go. But I'm excited to be joined again by you. We're continuing this poster project where we've had different creatives and artists come on Adobe Live and basically kind of create a poster based on the theme of home. And this is is this only your second time back? We kind of had that middle. We did our
Yeah,
little
yeah.
things. This
This
is only
is
the second time back. Yeah.
third episode. Third
Oh, the
episode,
third
yeah.
episode.
Second time.
Okay, cool, cool,
Yeah.
cool, cool. Well, there we go. So you can go back. I'll see if I can track down some links for some of the previous episodes and leave them in chat for those of you that may have missed them and want to bookmark them and check them out in the future. Or you can find all of that on the Adobe Live YouTube channel. And I'll also share a link that has some of the other posters in there, including and links to some of the episodes as well. So I've made a little Behance project page so you can find everything there if you'd like. So there you go. Cool. Well, shall we just kind of jump into it?
Let's do that. Yeah. So all right. So what you can see on screen here, as you kind of said, this is kind of third in a series of posters. So we are covering kind of isometric pixel art, and there's always a little bit of kind of talking to do before we can get into it. So what you're seeing here is kind of like, oh, geez, that's all you've done for 3 episodes, which is fair enough. But yeah, like I said, I think pixel art's super fun to work with, and we've spoken about this before, but there is often a little bit of like, before you jump in, here's what you got to do kind of thing. There's a fair bit of like setup that you got to plan for and think
Prep.
about before you start getting into the drawing. So at this stage now, you're kind of seeing it. All that stuff is done, and you can watch the first two to kind of catch up on that if you've missed it. But now we can get into the kind of slightly more appealing part of actually like creating a little bit more life into this and start building this out a little bit more. So this should be a little bit more kind of exciting to look at. And I'll
Nice.
explain what all this stuff is as we go along. Like, what are these 4 dots? Why have I got this kind of weird thing happening? And I'm using this sketch that you see on the left here as a kind of a reference point
That's cool.
to build this.
And so, yeah, for those of you just kind of joining us, just jumping in as well. So it's isometric art in Photoshop, which is,
That's right. Yeah.
you're obviously your portfolio, if you look at it, like most of your commercial portfolio is very, very different. I'll share a link in chat to that as well, so people can check it out. So yeah, it's quite an interesting, it's like quite a different process, isn't it? Almost chalk and cheese.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like, it's night and day process, but it's it's a fun thing to work with because it's like I always kind of view it as like going to the core of what Photoshop is, which is you're making art from squares, right? Like you're using pixels, whereas Illustrator uses vectors and kind of all that stuff. But here you're using pixels, so everything you do is made up of squares. So when you make a circle, it's actually just a bunch of squares. So this kind of brings that down to its core and lets you like get into this like quantum state of making art in Photoshop a little bit.
Nice. I love that.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Okay. So so we started with this kind of like this base, right? This like slab. And we're going isometric, and true isometric is not exactly what you're seeing here in terms of the angles, right? So like this angle here, whoops, sorry. This angle that we've got here is not exactly like isometric. But for the purposes of what we're doing here, it's close enough. So we're kind of doing this like top-down isometric. For those of you guys who don't know what isometric means, it's basically like, think of any kind of video game like SimCity, or any kind of like 3/4 down like strategy games like StarCraft or Civilizations or any of those kinds of things, where basically we need to have this map that occupies your entire screen, but you can go like scroll around and kind of travel around the map. So there's actually no perspective. Nothing kind of goes to a vanishing point, because obviously if you did, then the edges of the map, things would be absolutely tiny and the middle of the map would be huge. So we can't have that. So we create this sense of like depth and perspective without actually using any perspective when we're doing isometric. And the way you do that is this kind of like 60-30 angle off of verticality. In pixel art, what that translates to is a 2-to-1 ratio, right? So we've got two across, one up, two across, one up, two across, one up, so on and so forth. That's going to be the basis of everything that we're going to do. And as you can see, I've kind of done that kind of slab there as a basis for that, and everything is then following those lines to go with it. And I've got this guide underneath here just to kind of reuse it as a kind of a thing to go on. And so then we can kind of start building all of this stuff. And the really cool thing about the fact that there's no perspective here is I can really start to kind of reuse a whole bunch of different assets, right? So like, for instance, I'll do this very, very quickly and then we'll jump into kind of creating more stuff. But let's say, I'm going to duplicate this for a sec. Let's say that I didn't have this side of the bridge done and it's like, oh man, now I got to draw the other side of the bridge. I kind of don't. When I'm doing pixel art, I can actually just go in and select all of these guys and literally just go, boop, move it over to there. And I've got the other side of my bridge. There's so much that you can do here with this kind of stuff that makes it really kind of fun to work with. Same kind of thing, right? So if I've got, let's go back to my original layer. I started kind of building this wall over here, but I kind of actually don't have to, because I can just take this, duplicate that and flip it around, and I've got the other side of my wall ready to go.
Yeah,
which
and
is
you could just put
cool.
it right over the top as well, because
exactly, yeah. As long as I've like planned this out right, and you can see actually what's happening here is it's not really kind of lining up perfectly with the bottom part of my artwork here, but that's all right. I can just like, it's all about just the visuals. That'll kind of work. Same kind of thing here. Like, in order to finish this line, I could just go in and, draw this in manually. Sorry. And just go, bang, 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 bang. By the way, crucial thing. If you missed this, I am using the brush tool, but I'm using the pencil tool. So in the drop-down menu of your brush tool, there's this pencil tool. And that allows me to kind of get this pixel art kind of thing. If I don't use that, what I'm going to get, even if I'm down on 1 pixel, is I'm going to get this kind of blurry thing, which is Photoshop trying to like alleviate the harshness of these squares to give the illusion of kind of soft curves when you're doing circles and stuff. So I'm using that tool there. But so I could draw it, or I could just go the lazy man route and just grab a section over here, because everything is going to match up. Everything's on the same angle. I can just take that and just go bang, stick it right there. And I don't have to keep kind of drawing all these different things to kind of build. So it's really, now that I've kind of gotten these rules and setups, I can really start building this out quite fast, actually. So other important thing as well to note when I'm doing this is I'm using this selection tool. There's just the lasso tool here. And I'm making sure to untick, see if I can kind of zoom in on that, this anti-alias button up here.
Right.
Like by default, you want that ticked because you want it to be smooth and everything else. So when I'm kind of doing the bulk of my commercial work, I've got this ticked. For pixel art, you want to untick that. You want the aliasing to happen. You want it to be jagged and kind of lo-fi. And that then means that you can make these kind of clean selections. I can take this guy, use my move tool, and just duplicate him over to there. However, before I do that, I got to turn on this guide, move him down to make sure, again, that everything kind of lines up nicely with what I am trying to do. So I'm going to stick that there. Do that selection again, bang, and move him over to there, and just making sure that that guide is like lining up to what I need it to line up to. There we go. Bang. Nice. So now that's just kind of like those two things are the same length. They're matching up to the same side. Everything's working pretty well. So again, just like working to these guides and making sure that everything's nice and kind of clean and kind of the way I want it a little bit. Cool. So we've got this bridge in here. It's going over the river, and we can kind of get into this. But let's start thinking about this building that's over here, and maybe kind of we get to this Eiffel Tower as well today, and see how we can kind of build this out. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start by maybe making a new layer, just in case. Don't really need to when I'm working in pixel art, but it'll just make potentially things a little bit kind of smoother for me. And I'm going to take this section over here, just random section of that, duplicate it over to here, and just move him over to there. So we've got kind of the basis of our building. I'm going to line that up to the edge over here, just to, again, make sure that the placement of this is correct. I can turn on my pixel grid as well if you want, in terms of like kind of seeing where stuff lines up. So what I've got here is a custom grid where I've got an 8x8 pixel squares. It just makes my life a little bit easier kind of seeing where stuff is. If I'm dropping a kind of a square in here, it might not always necessarily drop where I want it to. So like, for instance, that one you saw, like this is where my cursor is, but actually the square just kind of snaps to that point down there.
Yeah.
So it just like, it might make your life a little bit easier kind of having that on there. Conversely, I could also just kind of take this guide that I created and just like duplicate the hell out of that and just fill my entire screen with this isometric guide. That's also something that I would do as an option for sure, just to kind of have it be a little bit easier to work with and make sure everything's nicely placed and that kind of stuff. But whatever, it's like, it's not necessarily the end of the world. There's a bunch of different ways you could kind of go about swinging this. Yeah.
Cool.
And so now I'm going to take this guy and duplicate him over again. Like so. Stick him right there. And he's probably going to be a little bit too deep actually for that placement of the Eiffel Tower there. So I might just make him a little bit more narrow. There we go.
So you're going back to your reference image that you've got, like your thumbnail, and you're like,
yeah,
just eyeballing the distance that you're going to need.
Exactly. And this is also why, like, I've put it on a separate layer. It just saves me a step. Like, if it's on the same layer, it's no biggie. I can make a selection, move it around. But I might decide to kind of move that block around if I want to, or just kind of resize it a little bit. It might just make my life a little bit easier. So, yeah. Again, the beauty of the pixel art kind of thing is that you don't have to have layers. The selections that you do will make everything just kind of that much smoother.
Yeah.
Let me merge these two together. And then I can take that section and duplicate it on down to here. And I've got the base of my building.
Nice.
So that's basically just kind of like the foot of this building. And now we can kind of raise it up a little bit. So before I do that, I'm just going to give a little bit of kind of the illusion of something a little bit more kind of even. And these two kind of pixels on the side here, you can see just this one. Oops. All right. This one just there, like this little extra bit just there, as well as that one. Actually kind of zooming out, they're making things just a little bit too sharp. And so this is where we can kind of cheat a little bit on our system and just kind of delete those two. And that just kind of, it's got a little bit more rounded because we kind of deleted that pixel, but it just feels a little bit more kind of natural. It's also going to give us a better starting point for creating some verticals. So we're going to go up from there, just using the shift key. Here I've got a choice to make because I've got 2 pixels wide. Like, do I go from here? Or do I go from here? Generally speaking, I tend to go from whatever is kind of the face of that building over there, and just kind of work to that. In fact, actually, before I do that, what I really want to do is I want to duplicate this guy and bring him up. So this will give me the height of my building from the get-go. And that's probably a much smarter way of doing it, rather than trying to like launching these verticals into the air and just kind of, a bit of a Hail Mary, see where they land. Doing this is just going to give me the basic structure of my building, and it's going to be a lot easier to work to. So just placing that up here. A little bit of a thing here is like, obviously I don't want it to kind of line up to the edge here. I also don't want it to line up to this edge right there. So I want it to just be a little bit taller, but substantially like tall enough that it just kind of stands out and creates a good amount of variety in my drawing there. So that'll do. And then I can drop my verticals down.
Is that a little bit like you don't want it to... There's kind of a thing in design where you don't want something to be just off the edge. You don't want it to be kind of just over, because it kind of looks wrong, like it kind of looks like a mistake, or it does something to your eye. Yeah,
that's exactly right. It's all about just kind of like, if you want things to line up, make sure they line up. This is just annoying as hell.
Feels
like
bad.
It's like, is it meant to be lined up? Is it not meant to be lined up? It looks like it's meant to line up.
Yeah.
That's really bad. It's like, it also means from a good kind of like character design standpoint, like video games, for instance, will always kind of do this thing where it's like, you want the shape of your character to be instantly recognizable on screen amidst, like bangs and flashes and a million other enemies on screen. You want yours to be able to be seen pretty easily. So if I create this thing here that has this line that kind of matches up, you really don't kind of see that building enough. So I really want that kind of verticality there to kind of show this corner a little bit more and kind of show it off. It might not make a big difference because I will have an Eiffel Tower here as well, but yeah, just good practice, good principle to kind of do this correctly as well.
Yeah.
So now I can go in and get rid of these guys, and probably gonna have to get rid of these guys as well. Okay, and I've got the basis of my building, and now I've got this kind of like angled like slate roof that Paris rooftops are quite well known for. So from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little bit of interest into this building because there's a lot of detail happening. So I've got a good kind of basis of that building, but I'm actually going to take that and duplicate it up and just create a little bit more of like a trim there. And in order to see what I'm doing, I'm going to just drop the opacity back down of that one. And I can delete all of this. In fact, I could probably delete all of the rest of it as well, but for now, that'll do. And then I'm going to merge these two guys back together and take some of this back out a little bit. So this is where it starts to be a little bit kind of funky. I don't need much here to just create this illusion on your eye that this is like a little bit of a ledge here that like sticks out. Just one little pixel at this distance is enough to like translate that into like, there's a ledge there. It's not kind of lining up. Which is the super fun thing I think with pixel art, is it can be really challenging. It can also be really fun to kind of try and create these illusions with very limited means. All right, so now we're going to continue this up. And from this one, what we can do is we can actually go, because we got an angle, but the angle's on an angle, if that makes kind of sense. Like, these things are straight, but they're on an angle because we're doing isometric. So like doing an angle on an angle is really tricky. And you kind of see me doing this down here. The curves on an angle in isometric art is really tricky. And I have not done a great job of this bridge. It looks a little bit kind of wonky, the curve. So there'd maybe be a little bit of work to come back to this and try and do. But for now, let's just say that that's good enough. But for here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my grid back on. And I'm just going to create myself over here a nice 45-degree curve. So I'm going to go bottom right, top left, and just hold down shift. And I've got a nice 45-degree angle curve. Well, not a curve, straight line. And then I can take that and see what happens when I put it here. It's probably not angled enough. Like, it's definitely showing me an angle, but it's really
when you,
not.
Like, just transform that. Like, if you transform that and then extend it up.
That's a great question. So that's one of those things that, like, weird stuff will start to happen, and like this looks okay, but when I hit return, it changes it a little bit more, and
it puts that aliasing in.
Yeah, so I need to actually change that to here, where it says bicubic. So when you change things, again, Photoshop is trying to do that thing. You can change it to nearest neighbor, and then that won't kind of do that weird thing. But Photoshop still often will make a last round of edits to something. It didn't do it this time, but often when I hit return, it's like, cool, now it's done, and it'll add more pixels in.
Right.
But you can see here, it's like with Photoshop, Illustrator, any of those programs, there's always this kind of give and take when you ask the program to do something for you. It's like, is it going to do it well enough that it's worth it? Or is the amount of work I'm going to have to do to fix it more than the amount of work I would have to do to just create it from scratch myself? And so in this instance, that's probably the case. Like, this is not ideal.
That's not helpful.
And so I probably need to make it myself. So 45 degrees wasn't cutting it. I could try and do my inverse and go 2 up, 1 across instead of 1 up, 2 across, and see what that's going to look like. And that's probably starting to feel a little bit better for me.
Yeah.
In terms of like recreating this kind of slate roof angle that we've got there. That's heaps better already. So I'm going to stick that right there and just move them up just a little bit more. And then I'm going to continue that up to here.
And you could, of course, like copy that and make it longer if you wanted to.
I could, yeah. I could just kind of like
it's easier just to manually finish it off. Yeah.
Yeah, or like easy, but also just like, you know, sometimes efficiency isn't necessarily the main thing that you should be aiming for. Like, sometimes it can be kind of fun and like relaxing. I get that it's not like necessarily the most riveting live stream content to watch me just like place these little squares over and over. But when you're kind of drawing it, there is an argument to be made for sure in terms of like, yeah, look, it's faster to do it that way, but sometimes it's kind of nice to just do it this way as well.
I get that even with typing. Like, sometimes it's like, well, you could just cut that sentence and then get this bit and replace it. But often I'll just retype the whole sentence, and I'm like, it's probably slightly faster to kind of do all the clicks and everything, but actually just rewriting it is kind of sometimes just a good thing to do. Like,
yeah, and like if you're a writer, like that's why you're doing it, right? Like you're an illustrator. You're here to do some illustrations, so like that's why you're doing it. So then like do the thing. But now I can take this guy over here, and we're gonna duplicate him over. To right there, and I hope I've placed him at the same height. Let's check the video referee and see if that lines up to there. Oh no! Oh, I'm 1 pixel off. Just 1 stupid pixel too high. That's all good. Can just make that selection back and just chuck it down to there. There we go. Cool. So now I've got the kind of the basic premise of my roof. And I'm going to take some more lines over here and go up here and oops, sorry. Right. The move tool, holding down option. So we're duplicating that. Bang, you go there and you go here. Now, what's happening here? Something kind of funky is happening on this side of the fence. Why are you doing that? That's weird.
Which one? The very back one?
Yeah, so this is lining up, but this isn't.
Right.
So something kind of strange has happened here. Possibly that I just haven't extended that one high enough. So let me just take that to there. That's weird. Anyways, the subtleties of pixel art. Who knows?
It's probably also like foundational thing. Like I know we're doing the live stream, so you're not going to sit there and try to figure that out for an hour or something. But like if you're doing this at home, like if people are doing this at home and this is like you're fairly early on, or at least it's the foundations of the building, you probably want to figure that out, right? Before you kind of build everything on top of it, because then other things could be out.
Exactly.
Is that right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So like this is like when you're starting out with the drawing, that's what I was talking about before. Like it's not necessarily for everybody, this kind of stuff, because there is a lot of like geekery that you need to kind of sort out before you can start drawing. But if you don't do it properly, exactly what you said is just like, you know, you were one pixel off at the start of this build, and so now your whole building doesn't stand up straight, and it's over, right?
Yeah.
It's just everything that you do from there will just be kind of funny and not line up properly. And it can be extremely infuriating to have that. So yeah, it's well worth trying to like fix these things at the start of your builds than at the stage where you just go super advanced, but whatever.
Yeah.
As you said, we're live, so not going to do that because it could take me forever, and it likely would require me to rebuild this thing from scratch just because of a single pixel awry somewhere. Yeah, so we're not about to do that. So now I'm going to take this guy and I can just like duplicate this over a bunch of times. And again, like I haven't paid heaps of attention at the start to like how wide this is. But what I am doing, if you can see, is I am actually making sure that every one of these is spaced out evenly. Whether or not it will line up at the end and create even sections is another matter. And I'm just one off, but that's okay because I could probably just get away with it, to be honest. But B, I can actually take this whole section of the building and just bump it up and over by 1 pixel, like so. Yeah. That might not work. No, it's not working. Okay. Whatever. We'll just leave it as such. But if I did this properly, you could potentially fix this and just get it to line up. It's not the end of the world. It's not super noticeable that there's a bit of an increased distance on that side. So we're going to leave it as such. What I will think about is creating some floors now. So we're going to take this guy and we're going to go up. And we're going to do the same thing again. Come on. No. There we go. Again, I'm not certain these are all the same height. So that is definitely something, again, like, building this properly, I would have to think about like making sure that these three sections are the same height.
You could like literally count the
And
pixels.
exactly. And this is where my 8 grid here is going to work, right? So it's like, it means I only have to count 3 instead of 24. But whatever. Let's just kind of get into the making of the artwork here. And we're going to start making a window. And I'm going to show you guys a couple of things that are kind of fun with this build. So we're going to build up a window, and I'm going to go across to here. And I kind of have to keep the same rule over there. So I'm going to go down and then over here. So I've got this kind of weird thing. And what I want to do is I want to make this into a blind. But I've run into a bit of an issue here because my blinded, the inside is 2 pixels wide. So I can't actually put something in the middle because I've only got 2 pixels to mess around with. So what I need to do is I need to actually take this and make sure that in the middle of my build, I've actually got 3 pixels to play with like this. And then I can actually put something in the middle here.
Right.
And that's going to give me this kind of like French blinds vibe. Just that 1 pixel is going to be enough to kind of look like the lines in that kind of a blind.
Yeah.
And then I can create the rest of my window. So I'm going to go 2, 2, 2. And we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 pixels. And we're going to go bang down here. And we're going to do the same over here. 2, 2, 2, and 1. Bang. So that's my window. And now I can take this and stick them on to here.
Yeah, nice.
And I've got this kind of like
shutters.
blind, yeah, shutters on the window. And then I can take all of this, duplicate that to just kind of give a little bit of a volume to that window.
Oh, right. It's like a window ledge, like you're adding that extra.
Yeah, like it's got a little bit of depth, right?
Yeah.
Now I can kind of start thinking about, all right, well, do I increase that kind of interest in this by placing a little bit of a kind of a cross in that window? And that's where it gets a little like the smaller you go, the less kind of information you have to go on that, and kind of it can start to be a little bit kind of start to do some funny things. But the nice thing with that is that obviously, as we've been doing before, I can take all of this and duplicate it over to here. And again, if I'd measured everything out right, I could put 3 windows side by side, and everything would be nice and kind of even. As it stands, that's not the case, but whatever. The nice thing also with this is because it's isometric and the perspective is the same on both sides, I can actually take this and I can go, hey, I want to actually just pop a window on this side as well.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
And so I can start to think about like reusing all these different assets that I've got all across my build to kind of place all of these in here.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, so like whenever you're doing kind of like a street scene, it literally is like building a little street scene in like a Sim City or whatever. Like you put like vending machines in and cars and stuff. It's like, I actually want to move that here and like turn it around and put it the other way. And it's like, you're literally just placing all these different assets within the build that can kind of help you out. So that's the kind of the main idea of kind of doing this building. And then from here, it's just, making sure everything lines up and getting it right. And then just kind of duplicating your assets over and over again to create this this sense of like a nice kind of build with a fair bit of detail in it and so on. I'm going to put a layer mask on to here just to kind of hide that. There we go. And now we're going to try and build our Eiffel Tower, and that's going to be potentially a little bit kind of tricky, but let's see how it goes.
Tricky.
Because again, we've got this like, this curved object that needs to also be kind of translated on an angle. It's a little bit kind of funny, but we're going to use the symmetry tool and we're going to kind of, fingers crossed, hope for the best. But once again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually start with a square. So I'm going to build this out with my kind of square thing. And I can get actually a square to happen pretty quickly using the symmetry tool on a 4-axis kind of idea. It's not snapping exactly where I want it, but that's all right.
It's funny that it's not snapping exactly to the grid.
It's probably just because my image here is not a divisible by 8 thing. So there's probably like, if I look at the bottom again, this is like, I don't want to get too like geekery, but yeah, you can see at the bottom here that the bottom square is not. So my image dimension is not divisible by 8. So it's not fitting exactly there. And so, yeah, long story short,
it's the whole thing.
Yeah. But now what I can do is I can just go in and say, all right, I'm going to put in a square. I'm going to start up here. And I'm going to go bang and start just kind of building this down. And it's going to, from just that one side, that kind of 4-sided symmetry is going to allow me to end up with a square pretty quickly. And again, I could do this and then just duplicate those 4 sides and use my transform tool to do it. But the symmetry tool is kind of helping me do that pretty easily right now. So I've got that nice kind of square right there. And we can turn that off now. And we're going to use that as our guide for our Eiffel Tower. So let's go into here and make a new layer. And we're going to call this ET. And we're going to make a vertical guide. And we're going to put that right there. Thankfully, he's snapping correctly. And so what I do now is you can either, if you're really good at this, you can try and kind of build it perfectly as you go and as you kind of go up and every pixel's in its right spot. Like I find that really challenging to do. So what I tend to do is I just freehand this. I'm using my Wacom, which actually if you're doing pixel art, you kind of don't absolutely need to use a drawing tablet. Because you can just like place these items in just by using a mouse, and you're not kind of drawing in the same way that you would with a pen. But here on when I'm kind of doing this, I absolutely kind of want that to be the case. So it's just a matter for me to kind of try and get something that I'm relatively happy with, and then I can go in and kind of fix that if I need to. I find that kind of solution a lot easier. There's a hell of a lot of stuff here that's just like super wrong and will not work, but it's a start for me to go like, all right, I've got a basis. I got the dimensions right. I got the proportions correct. So now it's just a matter for me to kind of mess around and see how else I can kind of try and fix this up a little bit. Go, and then we're going to kind of continue this section up to here.
And is the symmetry tool in this particular case useful just so that you can see very quickly if you're getting that line right and you're getting a consistent kind of thing? Because obviously you could just do it on one side and then duplicate it and then line it up and everything, but it seems like you got here very, very quick due to the symmetry tool.
Yeah, exactly. So before symmetry tool days, that is exactly the way you would do it. You would draw one side and then just kind of duplicate and flip that side over and then just kind of see what landed. But the symmetry tool does that kind of live for you.
Yeah.
And so it just makes sure that it's like, I wouldn't necessarily know if it's going to be too wide or too short without this kind of idea of the symmetry tool kind of showing me these changes that I'm making on the fly. So I would absolutely 100% recommend using the symmetry tool for doing this kind of thing. But again, like you said, like there's, always in all Adobe programs, there's more than one way to do what you're trying to do, which is nice. It just means you can go your own way.
Yeah, that's cool.
Cool. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to turn this off and I'll turn my symmetry off for now and just kind of have a look and see, first off, is this kind of playing nice? Have I made it too big? It's a little bit big, but I can just extend my base kind of ground tile a little bit. I'm pretty happy with how that's kind of looking right now. So let's undo that. Whoops, sorry. And we'll turn our symmetry back on. And now I'm actually going to drop this opacity down. And this is where I would start to kind of like do this properly and draw over this to get that kind of correct thing going.
Right.
But again, that's going to take a while. We've only got a few minutes left. So I kind of
we're getting pretty close to the end for today. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to kind of just, again, kind of show a little bit of kind of like highlight this idea of like stylization a little bit, and get the clouds in here to kind of start to play ball a little bit as well. And because we're doing this kind of idea of a video game, what we can do is we can kind of create these clouds. So let me take, I really need to start naming my layers a little bit more clearly. There we go. This one. I'm going to take this little section, duplicate that up to here. There we go. And I can just create this kind of like Mario style kind of cloud. Okay. Again, I would fix this and redraw. The basic premise here is that you don't want pixels doing this. You always want to have like your corner pixels cleaned up, because these guys give the illusion of a thicker line, and that's not really great. So that's one of the basic kind of premises of pixel art. That line is much cleaner than something like this, where you've got all these kind of like corner pixels going on. But again, this takes time. And we don't have it. So I'm going to duplicate that. And then I would just kind of take that up to here and just kind of create this like flat perspective cloud.
Really cool.
That's just this flat like a little wedge. Yeah. So again, this is not like, distinctive to pixel art, but because we are working in pixel art, it just kind of creates almost just like this like theater set prop cloud.
Yeah. It's like floating
that
toast.
Yeah, totally. And then we can take that and kind of duplicate him, and then that allows us to make like, all right, well, there's another cloud over here, and we can edit him, and just slowly start really kind of building out this kind of image with all these little different props and things that we're literally placing in here. And it's one of the things that I really like as a gamer with pixel art, is this idea of like, feel like I'm building a little bit of a world, and it's like, oh, you've got like, you just learned how to make a cafe table. You can pop it here. Like, do you want to put it here? What if there was some coffee on the table? You can do that, and some trees, and bang, bang, bang. And you're just kind of really just like Sim City building your illustration in that way with this pixel art. And the end result is always really kind of interesting, and has this kind of like kind of cute retro style that people kind of love to see a little bit of detail in there. It's almost like a Where's Wally? That won't translate for Americans and anybody else outside of Australia, but it's, like you got to find the dude with the red and white stripy t-shirt in the sea of illustration. And there's all this little kind of stuff. It's kind of nice, this world building thing where it's like, and you look and you find little different kind of pieces through there. And I think pixel art lends itself super, super well to that. So that's it for what I can kind of show you guys today. Next, I think we'll kind of start getting into colors and really showing volumes and stuff, and like fleshing this out with a little bit more detail and pop. But yeah, that's kind of the basic gist of like building your world with kind of pixel art.
Yeah, super, super awesome. Got me nostalgic for some like Sim City or like Baldur's Gate or even something like that. I was just thinking of like all the great isometric games that I've played over the years. And yeah, I love the crunchiness of the cloud and like just that artistic license to kind of get away with saying, hey, it's just going to be flat. Like it's not a fluffy cloud. It's like, as you said, I think your word was perfect with, what was it? It's like set, like prop.
Yeah, it's like a
piece,
like theater set prop.
Yeah, theater set. That's exactly right. Like could almost be on a stick and have like, an understudy running it over. But that's awesome, guys. So stay tuned for the part 3 or 4 that we'll be doing again down the track. I've shared a link as well to some of the other live streams and some of the other posters that other creators have made. Thanks for coming on this journey with us, and we'll see you next time on Adobe Live. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you, guys.
See you next time. Bye.
See you.